here for our first in the Professionals in Sustainability webinar series for spring 2022. I hope everyone's semester is off to a great start, and I'm very excited to see a lot of familiar names and faces here. So welcome, sustainability management students. So I think I got our closed captions or live transcript functioning. Brandon, is that correct? Great. Okay. So if needed, hopefully otherwise people can hear me okay. We're going to leave our microphones muted until we get into our Q&A session after we hear from our presenter. So otherwise, we do have the chat, and if you have a question you want to ask, feel free to enter it through our chat. But as I said, when we get into our Q&A portion, I think we'll go ahead and unmute. We've got a nice size group that would be good to hear from different people. So with that said, I just wanted to say, my name is Kathy Lang, and I work here in ESF's Open Academy office, where we are home to online education for the college. And in particular, as co-sponsors of this event, I just want to touch on the Bachelor of Science in Sustainability Management as our only currently fully online degree program at the college. We do also have a certificate program for grad level studies in environmental leadership. But as many of you here know, again, welcome again, sustainability management students. The Bachelor of Science is a degree completion program. So students come into our college with existing credits and then finish out the upper division coursework here. And I think we are in the fourth semester of offering our webinar series. So we've had a few presenters now, and I'm looking forward to this semester's. But I just wanted to highlight today, we are joined by Lynn Quayle, and I'm gonna not do her complete introduction right now, but we do have some more coming up, and registration for all of those are on our Open Academy webpage. I just also wanted to recognize that our first speaker to present for this series is with us. So Sue Fassler, our sustainability coordinator here on campus, is with us, and that's great. So thanks for being here. So mark these dates. It's pretty much every Tuesday. We did mix it up because I was worried we weren't being able to have our sustainability management students join us. So we put in an evening session, and here you guys are. So that's the way it goes, but that's great. So 2 weeks will be in the evening with John Pumilio, and then 2 weeks later we'll be again at 1 p.m. with Jody Smits-Anderson. So I'm really looking forward to. Just if you have some ideas for the future, you can always reach out to me. I put my email on the screen, and I'd also say the Office of Career Services does have recordings from past presenters, so feel free to access those there. I don't know if I already said we are recording this session, but we'll turn it off when we get to Q&A. So with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Career Services, John Turbeville, who will be introducing our speaker. I think we're in good time. Hopefully we have a majority of our registrants with us, but John, thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. We in Career Services are delighted to be partnering again with Kathy and the Open Academy on this series of webinars of professionals in sustainability. And today it is with great excitement that I introduce our presenter, Miss Lynn Quayle. Lynn works for Under Armour as their lead in volunteerism and social advocacy. Lynn's going to share with us some details and reflections from her work surrounding corporate social responsibility and some of the exciting initiatives and successes she has experienced working with corporate partners and local communities in this space. A special thank you to Lynn for being with us today. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to her.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. And thank you so much, everyone, for hopping on today. I'm really excited to share a bit about my learnings and my background with each of you, and hopefully have a great Q&A session at the end of this as well. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. I have a little bit of a presentation, more so you're not staring at my face the entire time. Excellent. So just a little overview on what I hope to cover today. Just a little bit of background on myself. I'll share with you a bit about my time in corporate community affairs at Constellation Brands, as well as my time in the not-for-profit sector as the executive director for CMAC, the not-for-profit amphitheater. And then now where I'm at in the corporate global community impact role at Under Armour, and then also just some key learnings that I've had throughout my career so far that I'd love to share with each of you. So a little bit of background, I am from the Finger Lakes region. Initially, I went to Marcus Whitman. If any of you are from the Gorham-Rushville area, which I would assume no one is, but a small town of about 900 people. And so when I wanted to go to college, I wanted to get far, far away. And that's what made me pick Pepperdine University, in which I have my degree in public relations from. I took a personality test in high school that told me I should major in public relations. And my parents told me that if I was going to Pepperdine, I needed to pick my major before I went. So that is why I have a PR degree. And so after I graduated in only 3 years, and I started my first full-time job the Monday after graduation at a tech PR firm in LA. And at the time, cloud storage was something that was new, and that was my kind of job, was the PR assistant to help develop some of the resources around some cloud storage opportunities. And it's something that we all know now, but back then I found it terribly boring. And just really did not feel fulfilled at all. So after a couple of months of that job, I was 20 years old. I was not looking forward to going to bed at night because I knew when I woke up in the morning, I'd be in that job again. And I made the decision to leave and move back in with my parents back in New York. And to really figure out what it was that I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to feel like I was making an impact every day when I went to work. So actually I ended up being a cheerleading coach at my high school. I ended up getting my personal trainer certification and doing that a little bit. I was a Zumba instructor. I was doing several odd jobs. And I also actually started my own social media PR firm with a friend. So all of that, I had quite a bit going on. And then a friend of mine said that there was an internship opportunity because she would be leaving at Constellation Brands for about 10 hours a week to run the social media accounts for CMAC, which was a not-for-profit that Constellation Brands heavily supported. So as I was in this exploratory phase and living with my parents who wanted me eagerly to get out of their house, I accepted the internship position. And within about a month, I was there full-time and removing myself from all of the other work that I had been doing. And so the role was in community affairs at Constellation Brands, which I was not even familiar with what that term was at the time. And really, not many people were familiar with the term at that time. And I'll get a little bit more into how CSR really was in its infancy stages here in a little bit. But I was there for almost a decade. And during my time there, I also served as the executive director of CMAC, as part of pro bono volunteering that Constellation offers to select employees that support some of the not-for-profits that they are heavily involved in that local community. And then just some lifestyle changes really brought me to where I am today at Under Armour, sitting in our global community impact team. And I have been here for about a year and a half now. So with that, I'll start really in my job at Constellation Brands in the community affairs department. And as I mentioned, CSR was really in its infancy stages. A lot of companies were just recognizing that they needed to do something in their local communities. And really a lot of what we were doing was like paddle raises at galas and things like that. A lot of things that the executives at the companies were passionate about, not really holding any data or accountability to the not-for-profit partners we were supporting. It was just more so a philanthropic piece that we were expected to do. And then in addition to that, we started to develop some employee engagement programs like our employee match program, where you match employee donations to not-for-profit entities of their choice. Also launched our volunteer program there, which allowed all of our employees to volunteer for 4 hours during select periods throughout the year, with programs that supported hunger and fighting hunger across the globe. And that was one that was a really interesting opportunity for us simply because we were a global brand. So really starting at that point, learning how to translate some of our programs across the globe, recognizing that issues that we have here in the United States are completely different than the issues that they have in Mexico, in Italy, in New Zealand, and really having to navigate that to make cohesive programming for our teams across the globe, but also ensuring that we're actually having an impact in those local communities. And then the third piece there is really our community giving, which is pure donation of product and dollars to not-for-profit entities. And so during this time, the way that CSR really even started at Constellation was the recognition that we needed to do something about it by our executives. And so there was a handful of executive sponsors that said they would take a lead in a steering committee to develop what the CSR programming would look like. And within that, there were 3 pillars. So there was giving back, and that's the one that I ended up chairing for a few years. Sustainability, in which we had 1 to 2 leads on that, with a lot of our operations support, really supporting all of the work from a reporting standpoint of the individuals that were leading that pillar. And then social responsibility, which at Constellation was around responsible drinking. And so even during my time there, it started, we were using paper brochures for our employee match program. We were knocking on doors every single day, going into different offices, trying to tell our employees about the work that we were doing. And by the end of the almost decade I was there, we had software systems, we had days of giving. It was starting to get ingrained more in the culture, but it was still a work in progress. And all of CSR still is a work in progress. There is no perfect plan around it. But one of the things that actually is the reason that I decided to go to a new company, it was simply because every company has a different idea around CSR and how it fits into their work. And that was one of the reasons that I decided to find a company that was a bit more focused on it than what I experienced in my time there, so that I could hopefully have a larger impact moving forward. So as I mentioned, a part of my work during my time at Constellation was with the Constellation Brands Marvin Sands Performing Arts Center, known as CMAC, and what I will refer to it as moving forward. And so I really started just with the social media from the get-go, and that was really just to help support and drive traffic to help cut expenses at the venue. At the time, social media was still pretty new. And so we were cutting our ad budgets there, and it was more cost efficient to have an intern help run those social accounts than it was for all of the paid advertising that had historically been done at the venue. And then my role just kind of continued to snowball. But during my time there, I was elevated to executive director for 3 years. And that was a result of strategic planning for the venue, in which we realized that we just did not have a sustainable model. And I use sustainable here in a different word than you're used to hearing it. But just from a work standpoint, there was a handful of executives at Constellation that were really contributing a lot to the work of the venue. And it really needed additional support from others outside of Constellation Brands to be able to maintain what had been created. So with that strategic plan, there was a few different initiatives that were put into place, but really working to identify how we as an independent venue could stand out with artists. So most likely you've heard of Live Nation or AEG, some of the largest promoters in the industry that run many of the venues that you probably go to. And so how could we be a differentiator as this independent venue that's between 2 Live Nation venues to make artists want to come to CMAC? So one of the things that occurred is we wanted to put an offer in for Jack Johnson. And Jack Johnson is hugely, hugely passionate about the environment and his impact on it, especially from a touring perspective. So he actually would not even look at an offer that we submitted unless we completed a sustainability rider for him, which was all of his sustainability requests, from things like recycled paper products, ensuring that we didn't have any single time use, water bottles for sale, things like that, tour bus restrictions on what could be plugged in when, LED lighting, a bunch of different things that we just had to report back on where we were at and what we could implement for his show. And in reviewing that rider, went back to our management team and said, if we're going to do this just to get this show, this is going to continue to be something. We can be one of the first in the industry to implement these policies. Let's actually take these things and put them into place. And so that's really how our Rock On Responsibly initiative was created. And with it, we started a zero waste initiative in partnership with a handful of community members. And then we also kind of just elevated some of the other work we had been doing to really keep it cohesive and to track data around it to ensure that we were growing year over year in the way that we were supporting local not-for-profits through our volunteer workers at the venue, as well as our tip donations at our wine tent. And then we also had a responsible drinking initiative there, where if you were a designated driver, you would receive complimentary water at the venue. And so this was something that we were really able to take, and without that corporate oversight, we didn't have to go through all the red tape that you normally have to do to get things approved in corporate as a not-for-profit. We really just had to present this to our board for sign off. So it was something that was really easy to get done, and it ended up really helping us out in the industry and really pushing us forward in booking acts. So that's, especially from a not-for-profit standpoint, I really think anyone that's looking to go in this space from a social sustainability perspective, understanding the not-for-profit side of things is something that's really, really interesting. Really, even from an administrative side of things, there's a lot of like grant paperwork and things that just take a lot of time of folks that work in the not-for-profit industry, that especially coming from a corporate standpoint, you want to give this not-for-profit money and you expect results in return for it. But it's something now that I can take back into my role after helping run a not-for-profit and understand kind of where some of those pain points are within that space, to ensure that we're good partners from a corporate perspective as well. And then that leads me to where I'm at today at Under Armour. And as I mentioned, I really wanted to find a company that really had ingrained more of their CSR initiatives into the culture. And at the same time, I also had a baby and needed to find a job that I would not be traveling back and forth to Rochester every other week. And so ended up finding the perfect role for me at Under Armour, leading their social advocacy and volunteerism. And I sit on our global community impact team. And one thing that I will say is a lot of the words that I have probably already used and will be using today, like community, volunteerism, social advocacy, sustainability, a lot of these different terms are used interchangeably. A lot of them are used for different things. You might find different keywords that are used in different companies. So that's something too, if anyone is looking for jobs in this space, I would just suggest really thinking very broad in the terminology that you're searching for and really understanding kind of some of those job descriptions. I will say the job I applied to is what my title is today, which is social advocacy and volunteerism. But I actually was just on a call earlier and we were talking about potentially changing global community impact again. So it might just be impact moving forward. And 2 years ago, before I started, it was the philanthropy department. So it's really ever changing and ever evolving, and every company, it's a little bit different. So just something for anyone that's looking to get in this space or really just learning more about it. There's a lot of different terms and every company kind of uses them a little bit differently. But really the biggest thing about this shift at Under Armour that I've been really lucky to be a part of is that when I started, we were year one into a 3-year plan of switching from a product-led brand to a purpose-led brand. So our purpose is to empower those who strive for more. And actually just 2 weeks ago, we took that really even one step further. and really announced this legacy play that we are embarking on over the next decade, and that is to impact millions of youth by providing access and opportunity to sport. And so in a lot of the work that I've talked about so far up until this point, it's been all driven by the community affairs team or the philanthropy team, the social team, to drive these efforts. And this is the first time that I am in a company that it's not just sitting on my team's responsibility, it is everyone in the brand. So supply chain needs to think about how their work will ultimately impact youth moving forward. And customer service, when you're at one of our Under Armour stores, how is their work impacting this? So it's something that everyone across the brand has been tasked with moving forward. So it's just a really meaningful time to be a part of the brand. I'm really excited to be in the role that I'm at currently, to help drive this work forward. And I'll say the one thing that's super helpful in this is that one purpose that really helps us align and drive our partners and what we say yes to and what we say no to. And something that I think as you're going into your new role and whatever that may be down the line, identifying what that North Star is, that main goal that you're working towards. So that way you can really take away some of the outliers that are taking away from your time and hurting you in the way to that goal. That's something that over the past year, we've really been working on our team to take away some of those things that just aren't driving this purpose as we're hoping to impact millions over a decade. Another thing I'll touch on is just meaningful partnerships. And I would say this from a relationship standpoint, from a not-for-profit standpoint, but something that's really, really huge as you're looking to make an impact is identifying who those partners are that can really help you get there. It was just on a call yesterday, actually, where we were talking about how as we're looking to impact these youth, we are finding partners that are helping impact these youth. I'm not going every day and coaching. I can because I have volunteer hours to do that. But that's not really part of the strategy from a community impact standpoint, but we train coaches who then impact those youth. So really just identifying those meaningful partners along the way. And like I mentioned, having that not-for-profit background, understanding some of those pain points so that you too can be a great partner in it. Another piece is engaging your employees, which at Under Armour we call our teammates. But last year was our 25th anniversary. And with that, we launched a 25 by 25 initiative, which is a goal to reach 1 million volunteer hours by 2025. And so all of our corporate teammates receive 40 hours of volunteer time off annually, and all of our retail teammates receive 4 hours of volunteer time off annually. And so this initiative is really tying around that to drive our teammates across the brand to get more involved in their communities, recognizing that it's nice to have dollars, it's nice to have great gear, but what else can we also provide our communities but engaged and passionate people to help support these efforts? So like I mentioned, I could be a coach, and a lot of members of my team actually coach in their local communities, and it might be something I'll get back into someday. But one way that we can really do that is supporting our teammates by allowing them the time off to give back to their communities. And that's something that's really, really cool about our culture, is that it's expected. And our CEO announced that partnership last year for the 25 by 25 initiative. And it's something that now is starting to be tied to our actual annual goals. So we're really starting to see some real progress around that. And then the other piece is just global impact. And I touched on it earlier, but recognizing that everywhere that we have a presence is a bit different. And so in Europe, they don't have sports in high school or middle school like we do here. They have club teams. So the infrastructure that we are looking to build to help support youth in Europe is going to be completely different than how we support the youth in the United States. And so this ties in a way to sustainability too, just because assuming that you work globally, and most likely you will in some of your roles, just understanding some of those cultural differences that really will impact how you can best do your job and make the most impact at the end of the day. And one thing to note too, just as we're talking about how in every company CSR kind of fits in a different way, at Constellation, CSR was all as a steering committee for about 7 years. And then now currently it sits under the communications function. And at Under Armour, sustainability goes into operations, and then community, we are under marketing. We all work very closely together in the work that we do, especially from a reporting standpoint. But something that's really interesting, every single company that I have heard of from peers in the space, it's different and it moves around as well. Most people that I know have reported into 2 or 3 different organizations within their companies over their tenure there. So something as you're heading into the workforce, just to be aware of that it changes. And so every company is different, and would just really suggest reaching out to folks within the space anywhere that you're looking to work, just to better understand that. And then just some key learnings that I have had in my time. I just love this quote to start with. And I really think when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to social responsibility, sometimes the issues seem so large and it's really difficult to figure out how our work can actually make an impact at the end of the day. And we kind of get overwhelmed by that. But I think sometimes we just have to put a plan in place, put one foot in front of the other, and start seeing what works and reevaluating that and continuing to get better as you move forward. But I think sometimes we get really caught in the weeds as to what is the exact best way to do something. And sometimes it's better just to do something and figure it out as you go. But some key things that I've learned, one, especially in this space, is how to tie your work back to the business. In sustainability, it is a little bit different because most likely you will be providing some form of cost savings, but that might come at a cost as well. But especially from a philanthropic standpoint, we are really a cost center at a company. So we are not helping directly drive sales within an organization. And so the company looks at us to be more lean than other departments because we aren't directly impacting those sales. And so the closer you can tie your work into cost savings, into engaging the consumer, into the actual work of the brand, the more successful you'll be. The more leaders within the organization will want to listen to your ideas and help implement them and really be a thought leader for you. And so that's a key takeaway in this space. The second thing is just to set boundaries. As I mentioned, I was 20 when I graduated. And I was somebody that was super eager to please and was available 24/7. And while that helped me get pretty far in my roles, it also made it very difficult for me when it was time to take a step back and really set those boundaries within the workspace. And so I would say just setting those boundaries and understanding what works for you to be efficient at your job, but also in your personal life. The more you can do that, you'll be respected amongst your peers and amongst your colleagues, but it will also make you just a better person at your job and in your home life. And then the third thing is figuring out where you can add value. And this is one that I will say is really personal to me lately. As I mentioned, I made that move because I had a child. And so I have an almost 2-year-old who is in daycare, but also gets sent home for a nice 10-day quarantine here and there. And gets sent home for various things that really throws a big wrench in my work life. And so I was talking to my coach one day and he said, but where can you add value? Like, how do you add value? Because I was like, sometimes I have like cars going on in the background. I am trying to be present in a meeting, but I'm really like just able to take notes. And he's like, if that means that somebody else on your team can participate and you can provide the follow-up with the notes, you're adding value. So I think when it comes to starting in new roles, where you might not be as informed or really think that you can add as much value as you can, just identifying really simple ways that you can. And that way you'll be respected by your peers and most likely will be given more opportunity in the future to really even continue to grow and continue to take on more and more responsibility. So with that, I feel like I have talked too much and would love if there are any questions for a little Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Lynn. I think I did allow folks to unmute themselves. So I would say the floor is open.